Hi, Foreman. First of all, thanks for joining us.
Pleasure is mine.
Tell our audience, how did Rumble in the Jungle start? What was the beginning, the genesis of it?
Well, the Rumble in the Jungles was actually a thought of Lloyd Price, great, I guess, music producer at that time, but also artist himself, who wanted to do something a little bit different. And he came up with this idea of bringing the top music makers to the jungle. And somewhere along the way, he brought in this guy named Don King, guy with the hair, and said, let's put this together. Well, this light goes off in Don's brain, who says, wow, maybe we should make it a little bit better, because nobody's just going to tune into Africa to watch a bunch of people dancing. Great idea as it is. So Don said, let's put a boxing match. And I know the boxing match that we can get. We can get George Foreman and Muhammad Ali. And we're going to call it the Rumble in the Jungle. That's where it started.
And that's where it started. And what a classic it turned out to be.
Yes, it was. Yes, it
Now, tell me something about your brother. Now, he had beat up on Frazier and Norton. He manhandled him. Did he think that Muhammad had a shot at beating him?
Well, at this time, George was like any 24-year-old. Ali was like 32, which today, I mean, it seems like nothing, but, at that time it was like old. So George was a 24-year-old kid that liked to do everything in a hurry. So why not let this fight be any different? Not realizing the mind of the person more than the physical part of the person he was coming up against in the ring that night.
So when he realized, did he really think that he could beat the champ? He thought he could.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, it was supposed to, you read all these stories. This is King Kong. George was King Kong. I mean, this was the thing. He was the baddest guy on the planet. He had destroyed Frazier, destroyed Norton, Joe Roman, and everybody in his way. Everybody that gave Ali any difficulty. George just like walked through them. So no, this was supposed to have been, and guys were saying like, oh, well, reporters, if Ali, if he survives this thing over here, he'll probably never box again. So, but you know what, it has to be made, and it's the Rumble in the Jungle, and some people even say, well, good thing that's way over here, because now the police won't put George in jail for killing an old man. I mean, that's the way it went.
So now, losing the championship, what did that do to your brother's self-esteem?
It's one of these things where you have this thing that you've held on to. It's never yours, but you think it is. Titles are like that, So that's why they put different names on them all the time, because they don't belong to any one person. But it doesn't matter. After a while, you get to thinking that it is yours. And then when that's taken away from you, you have to find other ways for your life to feel fulfilling. And it was very devastating to him. And it probably took, I would almost say, 20 years, to a point, to get it back. Of course, other things there were things in between that made his life.
Right.
But I don't think that ghost of the Rumble in the Jungle ever shook him until later on when he was able to win the title again.
What was to the accusation of the use of drugs in Africa? Was there anything to that?
Well, when you lose a fight, you got to come up with some kind of excuses. I mean, so it's like people say, I was drugged, I was this. But initially, and once it kind of became, I think Norman Mailer may have mentioned it in his book, that George's bottled water had been tampered with, and it was recorded in the dressing room that night that when he drank it, there was a thing fighters used to do back then they called dry it out, especially heavyweight fighters, because it was always meant to be fit, this nice touch. So when you went into the ring, your body was just tight. So you would always drink water right before it. It was like, oh boy, this is what I need to get me through that next level. And George took a drink from a bottle of this water, and he said, this water tastes like medicine. And his trainer at the time was manager and trainer Dick Sadler. So nope, same water he always drink. So he'd been taking his word all this time. He just drank the water. But he said from throughout that fight, he always felt that something was a little bit different. And what kind of maybe at that time you lost to Ali. So people like, okay, but you lost because you weren't supposed to lose, but you lost. So it's like it seems like an excuse. But a lot of things that people never really paid attention to if it was something that went on, chicanery as they call it, I guess is the word, is that after that fight, George's trainer and manager, Dick Sadler, actually showed up in Muhammad's corner for his next fight.
Whoa.
Which kind of adds credence sometime to what happened. But like I say, but yeah, I always said, man, if you had to lose to somebody, hey, it was Muhammad.
Exactly. Right.
Nothing wrong with that.
And I'm sure George felt the same
They
way.
felt the same way.
Let me ask you another question, because I get asked this question. Why was there no rematch?
Well, they only made one King Kong versus Godzilla movie. And King Kong looked up the first time, but it was just a thing that after it was done, and I spent 2 years actually trying to get that. And they just didn't want it because Herbert was adamant. We survived this guy one time. It's not going to, nowhere will we get will you be given the second chance to make that happen. So it just never went happen. And, of course.
Tell us who Herbert was.
Herbert Muhammad was Ali's manager, trusted advisor during about that time. And you have to look at this. It's like this. I was asked once how important do you think it was for boxing that Muhammad needed to win that fight? I believe Muhammad needed to win that fight. Had George destroyed Muhammad, not to say that we don't have the legacy of Ali, but because we do, but because Ali was Ali. But he would have become the destroyer. And I don't think there would have been anybody that could have been considered because it wouldn't have been any question. But after Muhammad won it, it was like, okay, who's going to knock off the next guy off the block? So I think it was important, and it actually added to the height of the sport because in the 70s and the 60s, 70s, and 80s, there was nothing bigger, and there was nothing bigger than Muhammad Ali. So that's the way it had. I think it just had to have been that way.
Talk to us about your brother, and I'm old enough, and a lot of other people are old enough to remember him being the great, great champion that he was. But now, all of a sudden, he's an entrepreneur in a titan of the system. On television, we see him. He's got cookers. He's just a businessman. Talk a little bit about his career after boxing.
Well, I always say that Muhammad knocked some sense into him. But it's one of those things that he fought on for a couple of more years after that. And after we got to a point that we kind of figured we're not going to get the rematch, at least not for this while. But then George took a fight in San Juan, Puerto Rico against Jimmy Young, another unheralded heavyweight guy. Matter of fact, a guy from Maryland and in the D.C. area, and was a crafty guy. Survived this fight, got the decision. That night in the dressing room, George had what our people called they wanted to call it some of everything. It's kind of hard to describe what they called it, but some people say, oh, he got hit too hard, he got heat frustration and all these things. But we found out that particular night, we found out later, maybe perhaps within months, that he had actually had a religious transformation in the dressing room that night. And again, you lose a fight, all things kind of go wrong. So you kind of, he lost me on that, I'm sorry. When you lose a fight, everybody just starts thinking, oh, you lost, you're looking for an excuse. This is just George. You lost again. But for the next 10 years, he started preaching and never got away from it. That night in the dressing room, he started saying these things like, Jesus Christ is coming alive in me. Hallelujah, I'm born again. And we were like, George, it's just a fight. But it wasn't. When I tell you, it was like in the dressing room that night, the transition. I seen this thing. There was a movie called The Exorcist one time, and all these creations that went on, if I had not been in there, I wouldn't have. There was something went on that night. And I guess that's what it was. Nobody wanted to believe it, but it did. And that turned him into a completely different individual after that.
That's amazing. That is amazing.
Yeah.
And that's something that a lot of people don't know.
No.
And that's why I'm happy that you're here to tell us about it. To close this out, and we'll make this our last question to you. Talk to me about what you're doing with your life in New Jersey. You're in sports yourself.
Yes.
Talk to me a little bit about what
Well, boxing is still my life. I promote shows whenever I'm given an opportunity to. I do a couple of radio stations, internet and as well as broadcast radio. So it keeps me close to the sport. And I do a lot of consulting. During 2008, I was a consultant for the Chinese for the Beijing Olympics, which was really, really in itself. I had never gotten a chance to go to Beijing, to the mainland China. Been in other areas before, and that was an experience itself I'll always remember. Got a chance to see the Great Wall, go to the Emperor's Palace and see those kind of things. So I've kind of, since that time, I've wrapped myself around working with children. We started the George Foreman Youth and Community Center back in 1984, George and myself, so we're still heavily involved in that, along with the normal thing that you try to do in helping kids stay out of trouble. That's why Harold's Kids in Trouble has always been just a fantastic thing. The idea that he would, kids in trouble, get it, but his goal is to get them before they get in trouble, right, and to stop them, because once it starts, it's kind of hard to, it's a slippery slope. Right. But those are the things that I try to keep myself, actively involved with. Married, of course, so my wife makes me clean up around the house and stuff like that.
And you better be glad she makes you do that, because you look good.
Thank you.
I can understand, and your wife's birthday was just I want to wish her a happy birthday.
Well,
it'll be belated by this time. But thank you so much for joining us and giving us your wisdom and your insights about your brother.
Well, you know what? This was a dream come true for me, because I've been a fan of yours early 70s, I know, when I started watching, just paying attention to things. And just to realize, never thinking that one day I'd get an opportunity. So this indeed was an opportunity for me, and I'm just glad to be here with you.
Well, it's my pleasure, and thanks again.
You're welcome.